Hi, I'm Rebecca Manda, and you are listening to the Bounce Mindset podcast. During my time as a busy mum and managing director in 2007, I managed significant personal loss and professional challenges as the only woman on the board. I believe we always have a choice, and that a resilient and what I call a bounce mindset is possible for anyone to develop. Join me as we meet some incredible guests, sharing their bounce forward stories, including my own in episode 1. I'm so excited to have you here, and also would like to thank Grow Radio Production and Stephen Bedell for Dragonfly, my very own theme tune. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Bounce Mindset podcast. Today's guest is someone whose voice many of you will instantly recognize. From the roar of Le Mans to the speed of IndyCar and the power of the Olympics, Tom Gaymor, best known for his commentary work with Sky Sports F1, Eurosport and TNT Sports, joins us to share his story. A former racing car driver whose career was cut short, sadly, by injury, Tom has bounced forward with purpose and passion, using his platform and lived experiences to inspire and empower others. Alongside his broadcasting work, he's a consultant in the motorsports industry, working with clients like Motorsport UK and London's Air Ambulance, focusing on everything from athlete management to high performance development. He's a passionate advocate for many charities and an ambassador to policing and emergency services. And I'm so excited that he's going to be joining me today. In the beginning of this conversation, he's going to share his story, and we explore how he rebuilt a career after injury and the mindset that was needed to get through that career and then to adapt after significant setbacks and to evolve in the face of adversity to get to where he is today. I'm so excited to be joining Tom, and I really hope you enjoy listening. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me to tell my story. It's not something that I do too often, going all the way back to the beginning. So I'll do my level best. But essentially, born in Southwest London. Here you can see the lovely backdrop. It's where I started and where I am now. But I've sort of ventured to different corners of the globe in the interim. I was born into a sporting family, so my stepdad played cricket for Surrey in England, and my grandfather was the England rugby doctor. So when I wasn't at school, meant to be doing my homework, I normally found myself on the edge of a cricket field or at Twickenham watching England go through their training, and my granddad stitch ears back on and lips back together and that kind of thing. But my interest was motorsport, and I was exposed to that quite late through my granddad, who was a doctor, as I said, and he was looking after a racing team, doing all their inoculations and various different things to ensure that they can travel around the world and not pick up various illnesses and diseases and so forth. So I was there. And once you're exposed to the sight and the smell and that whole environment, it was something I knew. I fell in love with it from day one. I'd always had go-karting parties, so I'd always had that burning desire to do something like that, and that adrenaline desire and need for speed and various different things. So I'd have my karting parties when other people were having bowling parties and so forth. And motorsport's one of those sports where it's not very accessible, and you don't know how to get into it unless you're born into that environment. It's not like rugby, football, cricket, or whatever sport you play. You don't have that curriculum or that after school activity and the parents at the school gates discussing how and what to do. So it wasn't until I was exposed to this environment and went to Silverstone with BPR and watched from afar that this progression began, and I was nagging away at my parents, and everything's expensive, never mind what sport you do, but motorsport especially so. So the sort of burning desire didn't go past the hobby until I reached teenage years, and I started to do well at the in-kart club and the local things that I was doing, and that led to different opportunities. And then when I was 16, I was in a competition at Silverstone, and I was picked by the judges there to move to Le Mans and compete in a European Championship. My first year in cars, fully funded by Renault and Elf. That's why I was based in France, and that was the stepping stone. It's a bit like a young athlete or a football player being picked up by an academy, but rather than that being a hobby and something that you do every week, actually going into that full-time semi-pro environment. I wasn't being paid, but everything that I could want and need was catered for me. It was free, and I was thrust into living in France from the age of 16, 17. They sent me to the local lycée, the local école, and I wasn't very studious in the UK, but then having to learn maths or history and French was even more of a challenge. But I needed to learn the language. I needed to speak to the mechanics, the engineers, my teammates. And it was a real challenge, because you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. No one puts more pressure on your shoulders than yourself when you have a burning desire and a dream. And this was my first step, my first opportunity to realize that dream. And what an opportunity it was, traveling around Europe, France, the world at times, and trying to be the best that I could be. But we'll touch on it later in this podcast. It was a challenge, and I didn't really recognize it at the time, but you do forget to enjoy it, because actually that experience, that dream, there's so much pressure on your shoulders. You win a race, it's not a celebration, it's a relief. And then you wake up Monday morning and it's like, right, how do we repeat that? What's next? Okay, this is the circuit, this is the round. That's how we execute, and that's how we try and win that race. And you're just on to the next thing. And it's a lot on a young person's shoulders.
Yeah, at 16. So in your when you weren't on the track racing and trying to be the best you could be, you were concentrating on learning in a different language. I mean,
you're learning a different language. You're knee deep in maths and physics and setup sheets, and looking at reviewing various different circuits, watching video, turning points, apexes, how you get the car rotated, the under rotation, the challenges to avoid, what bumps, what curbs, what gears you need to be in on the exit points, the RPM, your minimum speeds. There's so much to take in, and you're learning that in a different language as well. And then your physical work in terms of training, being fit, because the heat and the environment is really hard. So up to 40 degrees in the car, you're wearing triple layer Nomex suit, so your core body temperature is pushing 40 degrees, and you're in there high heart rate for a long period of time. It's a real challenge. So so that was my early years, and actually things went really well. I won races, and I was highly regarded, and I had an article in the Daily Mail, whole page in the sports section, and things looked really good. And then I sailed into adversity. So I broke my back, but it wasn't a sort of conventional break. It was an accident. I've had bigger accidents, but no, it wasn't during a race. It was during a test day. But it's where the bottom of your spine doesn't form properly. So the bony union's not quite right. Now, 20% of the world's population or something like that have it. It just leads to a little bit of minor backache, which we all have at various ages and times in our life. And the problem is I was hitting brick walls at 150 miles an hour, and that did the sort of the cartilage and the lack of bony union no good. So it crumbled away like a biscuit. So I had this sort of framework put into my lumbar spine and bone grafts from my pelvis. And, it's a very, very long operation, a complex operation, various different challenges. And the road to recovery is considerable. It's like having a whole lumbar spine reconstruction. And now, if you have a knee reconstruction, or anybody that's listening to this that knows someone who has or has had that, you know how debilitating that is. You're out the game, can't move your leg, can't do anything, but you've got another leg, right? And however uncomfortable that is, and however painful it is, and however challenging it is, you've got another leg. You can still try and move around. Well, when it's your back, you haven't got another back. You are just flat, and you can't move, you can't do anything. You have to, excuse me, almost learn to walk again. I had all the strength and the feeling, but you just have, I had all the feeling, sorry, but no strength. So it was just really difficult. And then that sort of physical um, journey led to a prolonged mental health journey. But it was, going back to my story, essentially the end of my career. I lost so much career momentum. The surgeon said, don't go back and drive again, because there was an inherent weakness from where the bone joined the new metal work. I did get back in a car. I did drive again, but I wasn't the same. I wasn't the same physically. I wasn't the same mentally. I hung on to that dream for far too long, because looking back at it on reflection, it's all you know, it's your identity, it's everything about you, it's your whole life is at stake at that moment. That's how you see it, that's how you view it. And what was I
Heartbreaking.
going to be? Yeah, who was I going to be? What was I going to be? What was the point if
How
I
old
couldn't
were
do
you,
this?
Tom?
So by this stage I was sort of 21, 22.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
So
and that passion
it
had
was a
driven
challenge.
you for so long. That passion had taken you through all that,
Yeah,
difficult training, and I suppose,
I'd had this amazing life in terms
yeah,
of everything had gone like that, and I wasn't geared up to deal with this. And it was me and my mum. My mum always was by my side. She came to every race, and she was a huge supporter. And not long after my operation, she suffered a sort of catastrophic brain hemorrhage. So she was in a coma for almost 3 months. She spent 14 months in hospital.
okay,
And that was not long into my rehabilitation as
yeah,
well. So everything was just falling apart around me.
yeah,
I had no income stream. I, was trying to look after my little sister as well, even though I couldn't look after myself. My mum was in hospital in the middle of London, and it was just a really difficult time. And I had no choice but to just try and get through each day. But that took a huge toll on me and my sort of mental health. And I never took a moment to reflect on that. It was just about survival. It was just, my sort of mantra around and dedication to the cause around my professional sporting journey really helped me in that moment. But your greatest strength is so often your greatest Achilles heel. So that total just resilience
yeah,
to just plod on at all costs, just get to the finish line, and then everything else that you're experiencing can just wait until the
yeah,
finish line. And that approach, yes, it may have been beneficial in times and or moments on that journey, but it was a catastrophe, catastrophic in terms of once I got to the finish line, once I realized that, I was going to be okay, my mom was going to be okay, and there was life after motorsport. Once I got to that space, I was in no mental state to be able to grab that opportunity. I was broken. That was the reality of the situation. So that's a rough, and I probably missed bits out, but that's a rough segment or story
history.
to get me
Mm.
to where I am now.
Was the catalyst, do you think, that got you from that moment of being broken and, 21, no income? What was the changing moment, do you think, for you?
There's no eureka moment, and there's no golden key, and it doesn't change overnight. And it's really, really important to recognize that. So for me, I had access to professional medical help assistance, but I was frightened about how I was feeling and what I was feeling. I'd been nervous before. I'd not been able to eat. I'd not been able to sleep. I'd been just an absolute bag of nerves, and that horrible experience of every night before a big event or whatever it is, just feeling sick and what have I put myself into? That's part of high performance. That never goes away. You just find a way to cope with that environment. But this anxiety was something that I'd never felt before. I couldn't eat in restaurants. I couldn't go to the cinema. I couldn't get on a train. I couldn't. And it's not a case of mind over matter or oh, have you tried not thinking about it? Yeah, I tried not thinking about it. And this was a physical feeling and a feeling of crisis that just wouldn't go away, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't then cope with it, and it wasn't until I was meant to fly to America to test the racing car. And I got to the airport and I just basically broke down. I couldn't get on the plane. Everything fell apart. And I got in a taxi because I just needed to escape. I just needed to get out of there. And I remember sitting in bumper to bumper traffic, gridlock traffic outside of Heathrow because it was early morning, rush hour in West London. And how do I tell my parents? How do I tell my manager? How do I tell the team in America? How do I cope with this realization that it's finally over, that I'm at rock bottom, that I cannot go on? And that was literally the worst couple of hours of my life. Where do I go? Everyone's expecting me to be on a plane. And so that was rock bottom. That was the catalyst to try and get the help that I needed. I had that help in abundance. I took none of it. I was frightened. I used to go and see people for treatment and lie my way through it, drip feed the information to them because, I felt that if I really told them what I was thinking or feeling, they'd think I was mad and not let me leave. Or, you just don't, this is 20 years ago, you don't think that other people are feeling or experiencing this. And it wasn't until I was invited to a room full of trusted people, sports people that have won World Cups, that have won medals at international events, that people that I knew and looked up to. And I was invited to this trusted space, and they basically were just talking freely about their journey, like I am now.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away. I left that room empowered, thinking it's not just me. These people that, when they were talking, I was like, that's me, that I'm feeling all of these things. And it was the eureka moments to go and speak to them, and B, talk about my journey, but C, have more confidence in the medical provisions and people that were around me. And then it was then that I started that long journey, and I'm still on it. So when I say that there's no golden key or magic solution, I'm still on that journey, sort of 20 years down the line. But for me, that understanding that I was normal, that other people feel this, that this is okay to feel like this. This is what happens when you face adversity. This is the body and the mind trying to cope with what it is that you're trying to process. So when I understood that, it was a very special day, and I look back at that moment, and I'm eternally grateful. And it was the catalyst to be not just who I am today, but have the interest that I have today in other people, in not just supporting other people, but why do we think and behave the way that we do in certain moments? I'm just passionate about that sort of psychology and the human element, if you like.
Yeah. And you were determined to get on the track. You say you're resilient to the cause and don't fixate on the route to get there. I know that's one of your pillars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you really did do that, not with the steering wheel in your hands, you say, but a microphone in your hands. How did that
Yeah, definitely.
come
Well,
about?
that's sort of part two of the story. So, I'd lost my identity and I didn't know what I was going to do. And uh, that was a frightening time because I've been so driven and I've been so controlled
Mm.
and regulated for a large period of my life. And TV gave me a lifeline. Simon Reed, who's a very famous voice in the world of broadcasting. His brother's actually Ollie Reed,
Yes.
the famous actor. So
Yeah.
yeah, he gave me an opportunity at Eurosport, and I never looked back. And I was a pundit to start off with, and no one teaches you how to do it, and it's a really chaotic environment, live TV, and it it reminded me of being a driver because you have that performer element, you have that adrenaline dump, that 10, 9, 8, the countdown to live TV, and it's a really really exciting space to be in and work in, and I fell in love with it. And I'm very fortunate to have had a career in being a broadcaster. I made the transition from being a pundit to the lead broadcaster. So a high profile example of that's Gary Lineker. He started as a pundit and has led coverage very successfully over the decades for various different platforms. And I made that transition, and I'm now a lead broadcaster, and I have younger, better looking racing drivers on the sofa that know a bit more about it than me, more current. And yeah, I've just worked all night over the weekend for TNT Sports because we're on Japanese hours. So there's no glamour in TV. Started at
No.
12:30, midnight 30, and finished at 10 a.m. But it's something that I love. It's something that has led to other opportunities and learning a new skill set,
Yeah.
and actually putting right some of the wrongs. So learning
Yes.
to enjoy things, learning not to put too much pressure on yourself,
Yeah.
learning not to be governed by external gratification, make the one person you want to impress the most yourself.
Yeah.
It's been a great journey so far.
Fantastic. And so that passion it comes across, that passion of the 16-year-old boy who would put himself through anything to get success on the track. You have absolutely, you can see that. I mean, we're on video at the moment, and this podcast is available on YouTube if you want to see the passion, but you can probably feel it anyway or hear it in Tom's voice. And that passion drives us, doesn't it? And when we have huge goals, everything else, there's times that we trip up, the times on the route that are difficult, we have less time to feel sorry for ourselves and to just keep going and focus on that goal. And I'm not talking about the back injury. That was a huge diversion on that route. But that learning of the language, learning to broadcast, and that step, our brain is incredible, isn't it? The way we can learn those new skills, and that is part of our resilience, don't you think, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. When I use the word resilient, I think I'm resilient towards certain things. I'm less resilient towards other things. And when
Mm-hmm.
I look into that, it's because when I'm resilient, I know what I'm being resilient towards.
Mm-hmm.
So my back, for example, I focused on the physical elements of the rehabilitation. So I was being resilient towards the physical challenges that I was facing, and I was working tirelessly, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, sleeping, eating, doing all the right things to be resilient towards that challenge. I was less resilient towards the mental health challenge that I was facing, because I I was unaware of what it was that I was trying to be resilient towards, and unsighted in terms of how how are you resilient towards this? So I knew the process, I trusted the process in terms of the physical rehabilitation, but I didn't understand the mental health journey, and I didn't then understand how to be resilient towards it. So with the word resilience, I don't think people are just resilient. I don't think some people have resilience, some people don't have resilience. I think we are resilient as human beings when we know and understand what it is we're trying to be resilient towards, and we have a process in place to be resilient towards that. Then you get into another discussion as to how healthy is your process.
Mm.
Because it's important to look after yourself, and to, when we're being resilient towards things, actually be fully transparent. So how can I explain this? So I can look at an example and say, well, actually, when I did understand I had a mental health challenge and journey to go on, I didn't face it. I wasn't transparent. So yes, I was being resilient in that space because I was forcing myself into certain environments. I was forcing myself through it. I was forcing myself but that wasn't healthy. So it wasn't sustainable. So yes, I was being resilient. I touched on that earlier, but it wasn't a sustainable resilience. It wasn't a healthy resilience. So for me, being healthy around what it is you're trying to be resilient towards is really important as well.
Absolutely. And your resilience, when I talk of resilience, I also think people think, sorry, I'll say that again. I sometimes think that people assume you're a strong person if you can just get on with it and you don't ask for help. I once had someone say to me, I'm really strong, I never ask for help. And I thought, gosh, that's the opposite of how I would define resilience or strength. And actually, it was that moment that you opened up and you asked for help, in that conference, and all of those racing drivers, all those broadcasters were sharing their story. And it, for me, my most resilient moment was when I reached out and learned from these people and realized I wasn't on my own. I wasn't the only one who felt like that. And that was so empowering. So that, I suppose, drove your awareness of what you're being resilient about. And
yeah, I think you're right there. And I think, you then move the conversation onto whether or not you're coping, and or are you flourishing. That that is really important. I was coping. Yeah, the power of reflection. I'm quite fortunate because of the sports environment, the sports experience, that I have quite a. My wife thinks I'm intense, but I have quite a good power of reflection, and I'm not frightened to fail. So that doesn't, because I always say you either win or you learn. And I put myself in really challenging spaces when it comes to high performance and that kind of thing. I'm not frightened to have a negative result, because you learn from that. And so that whole power of reflection, being true to yourself, how did you feel? How did you do in that moment? What did you do is really important, I think, to the resilience piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are the phrases that you're coming out with. I'm just thinking, wow, what an amazing inspiration you would be to listen to. And you are listening to you now. You either win or you learn. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, and you're not only using your skill in broadcasting, but the things that you've learned, that openness about your journey, and that helping others by getting help. And you talk about speaking out and creating those trusted spaces, and you're doing that, aren't you, with organizations such as Divert London, helping the policing and emergency services, and various other trusts and charities. Is that right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I am. I'm, we have a really good narrative in society at the moment around speaking out, and there's
Yeah.
lots about the importance of mental health and recognizing mental health, but people aren't speaking out. And that is something that I've experienced. I didn't speak out, and I had lots of people asking me how I was. I had lots of people who were there to help me, but I didn't reach out. I didn't speak out. I always reflect on that, and I ask myself why. I think there was a lot of fear. You feel very isolated. You feel very vulnerable. It's really uncomfortable to feel those two things, and you're very, very fearful. And it's also hard to speak to someone who bounces along, is really bubbly, that is experiencing their best day, and you're not. It just doesn't feel natural. So when people ask how you are, you tend not to really tell them how you are. And then, from the sort of medical practitioner perspective, I was frightened about telling people how I really felt. From my perspective, I'm really passionate about creating trusted spaces. So how did I speak out? Why did I speak out? There was an environment, a trusted space where people were showing their vulnerability. And, this is not one size fits all, it doesn't work for everyone. But I speak to a lot of people that when you talk about your vulnerability, when you create a trusted space for people, they're more likely to A, reflect and recognize some of them in what you're saying, and B, actually come up to you afterwards and say, that's exactly how I'm feeling. I do lots of speaking. I've had members from the FBI, from the Met Police, from the US intelligence, from all kinds of different environments come up to me or message me afterwards and say, I'm feeling all of those things. So I'm really passionate about creating the trusted space, creating that or offering up that vulnerability so that others feel empowered to do the same thing. And I think that if we can do more of that, especially in the employment sector, I think, we've got a really good um, narrative going in wider society, but people are still scared to talk openly in work environments because it could compromise the journey that they're on. If you open up and you really tell people how you feel, it could end up with a mark against your name. And I think that is still a real blocker to a lot of people
It
opening
is.
up and speaking.
I remember doing some research, and 76% of leaders would not take a personal issue that was holding them back in the workplace to their HR team. They just keep it to themselves and keep going, which is really, really difficult. And we need to keep working on that. And I think that's why coaching is so powerful, because you are in a room and the coach needs to create that trusted space. And when we do the Bounce Mindset program, and there's 8 people on the program, and we're all talking about the things that we've been talking about today, and how to build your resilience in your career and get the most out of your career, and get back up after the knockbacks. And we create a trusted space so that, and that when the first person you know, if the first person, when you say, what would you like to get out of the program? If the first person says, actually, I'd like to build my confidence, it was really knocked in my last role. And even if they get a little bit emotional sometimes, it opens it up, and you notice everybody then giving what they'd like to get out of the program has got so much more depth than if the first person says, I'd like to know how to be more resilient in my career, and they keep it really high level. It doesn't open up the conversation as much as that vulnerability will do.
Because we don't talk anywhere near enough about the human element. So all of our training in the workspace, or whether or not it's a sports environment, is all on that sort of professional element. And
So
when we, whether or not we're learning to develop systems, or we're learning the tech and tack, or we're doing whatever it is, they might just add a bolt on to say, well, you need to be resilient to this and this and that, but there's no emphasis on the human under the performer. And that is the most important part, because you cannot flourish, you cannot be the best that you can be on the most important days of your life, and or be the best that you can be towards your teams on a daily basis, unless the human element is right. And and we just don't focus on that. We focus on, let's say, England football and the penalties, taking the penalty, but we don't focus on the human being who might have had a real journey with a relative dying, or they've split up with their partner, or whatever it is. They've gone to this tournament, they've gone to that, they haven't slept well, they've got this worry, that worry, that we don't focus on that individual. And if that individual isn't in the right space, they're not going to be able to score the penalty, or be the best that they can be in that most important moment. And for me, so much of my coaching is just focusing on the human being. It's not focusing on how we reach the right brake shape, or how we rotate the car into the corner, or minimum speeds. It's actually just that human element. What did they have for breakfast? How are they feeling? How did they sleep? Because if we can get that bit right, most of the rest just takes care of itself, because we are highly trained. We've got all the technical and tactical skill set, all the information. We know all the procedures. We know how to do so many different things in the workspace. Actually, that will just take care of itself. It'll come naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. And especially in high performance environments like the ones you're coaching in, it's so important that we recognize the human being behind the human doing. And so yeah, Lewis Hamilton at the weekend has put pictures of his dog as very poorly. I hope.
Yeah, Roscoe.
Roscoe, that's it. And his someone from his team came to visit him, and he said he'd never felt this low, and he came out to see him after getting that message. And that, those moments, you think, oh my goodness, I didn't know. It's those moments that really highlight that we are human beings, and we're not machines.
And he's offering up that vulnerability. He's had a really challenging year. He's talked about it at times, and now here he is on a personal level, showing some heartbreak, showing the realities of what goes on. He's not a racing driver. He's just a human being. And that human being happens to drive racing cars, but that human being goes through what every other human being goes through, and the trauma and the sort of tragedy of having a lifelong pet that may no longer be with us. It's really hard. So he's actually just offering up that vulnerability. I think that's really important.
It is, especially for men. I think we're coming up to World Men's Day, aren't we, in November? And we, at least we're talking about it. We are doing things about it. There's people like you that are out there sharing your story, and that makes it easier for everybody to be a little bit more open. You're like that first person in my program that says, actually, this is how I'm, this is really
Yeah.
what's going on for me. And you're doing that on a massive scale with organizations like the NFRSA and the LRPD Trust. I'm just reading those because I want to get them in, because
Yeah.
I want people to
Yeah.
look them up and see the work you're doing.
Well, that's a lovely link from Roscoe into the sort of Dogs Trust and
Yes.
Animal Trust, the National Retired Service Animals and the London Retired Police Dogs. So obviously,
Yeah.
I do a load of work helping human beings and supporting human beings and police officers, and the animals are no different that work in those sort of the law enforcement space. They don't choose that. They are born into that space, and they're highly trained and lead a life of service, and it's really important that they're looked after in their retirement as well. So when I was um told that they don't, they're uninsurable, that they don't have a pension, that the handlers and the owners and, they are there left with the vet bills and remortgaging their houses to keep their pets and pets alive, that's not right. So there's charities, and that's just two charities. There's charities nationwide that do wonderful work raising money to support the handlers that are caring for their retired service animals, and they deserve that the love in their eyes and the sort of camaraderie that the handlers have with their animals is so special. And when you see that, you just want to get involved and try and highlight it and sort of promote their well-being in retirement as much as you can.
Absolutely. What an amazing thing to do, Tom. Really
Mm,
incredible. Um,
mm,
so what you've got so many amazing phrases, and the
mm,
key message that is coming across is that your greatest strength can often be your Achilles heel.
mm,
Your resilience depends on what you're
mm,
aware of. I think I
mm,
love that.
mm,
As many people in the workplace are told you need to
mm,
be more resilient.
mm,
Well, that's a ridiculous phrase,
mm,
because they might not know what they
mm,
need to be more resilient about.
mm.
Really fascinating. If we're thinking about our listeners, some of whom are really wanting to come outside of their comfort
Mm,
zone,
mm,
or needs, they might not want to, but they need to come outside of their comfort zone to really get the best out of their career, that next step, that promotion. What advice would you give them? What can you leave them with?
yeah, good question. Buzzword bingo. I think that aside, it's the importance of being yourself.
Mhm.
And we've talked about the human element, but don't be scared to be the best that you can be. Don't be shaped by other people's responses to you and or criticism. Strengths. We spend far too long as human beings focusing on the things that we can't do. So there's so many things that we can do and we can do well. Focus on those things and strengthen those strengths. Don't be scared to put yourself into uncomfortable spaces. So don't be frightened about failing or outcomes. That's part and parcel of the journey. It doesn't define you. You are still who you are, and you are still learning and developing. And you can be incredibly proud of yourself for putting yourself in that into that unknown. We try and control everything. We try and visualize the perfect, but actually be comfortable with the unknown, visualize the imperfect, and have a trusted process that you can piece together in those spaces to manage them. So, my wife always says to me, "Oh, I wish I was like you and more confident public speaking." And I say, well, I still feel all of the things that you do. I still feel a little bit sick over breakfast. I still don't sleep very well. I still feel the nerves and the anxiety, but I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with the unknown. Well, what happens if you say the wrong thing? Well, I'm comfortable with that because I've got a trusted process and I'm not focusing on the outcome. So often we focus on outcome, whether or not we pass or we fail, whether or not we do the right or wrong thing, and just bring it back to the process. So it's, how do I stand in this moment? How do I talk? What are my phrases? Where am I projecting my voice to? So you're just dialing back from all of those catastrophic thoughts and what ifs to actually just focusing on what it is you need to do. If it the sort of uncomfortable feeling never goes away, but if you are totally focused on the process, it's amazing how the outcome just takes care of itself, and actually how you can just step by step work your way through that uncomfortable experience.
Absolutely. And a very big part of mindfulness is that being in the now. Just so what you're saying is just stay in the now, just keep going, keep treading onwards, trust in the process. And at the end of the day, you'll either win or you'll learn.
Absolutely.
I love that. And it's a great place for us to end on. Tom, thank you so much for being with me today. And I know you're going to inspire loads of our listeners. And I'm really, really grateful to you for sharing your journey. Thank you for listening to the Bounce Mindset podcast. If you would like a coach in your pocket with free regular hints and tips to help you bounce forward in your career or personal life, then please feel free to go to the Bounce Mindset podcast show notes. And don't forget to leave a review for us. Thank you. Bye.